to the Who's On Podcast Postgame Report here after Virginia beats Coastal Carolina 48-7. We're, of course, part of the Sabre Podcast Network, presented in part by Joe Reed and Alcova Mortgage. Score your perfect home today. But again, 48-7, the final score here at Scott Stadium. New series we're going to try out here on the Who's On Podcast. Just a quick little post-game report, tell you everything Tony Elliott said and some of the players, as well as go over a couple key details from the game. But here tonight, again, 48-7, that's the most points scored in the Tony Elliott era, also the biggest margin of victory in the Tony Elliott era. The last biggest margin was 21 points against Richmond. The most points they'd scored prior to this was against Coastal Carolina last year, where they scored 43 down in Myrtle Beach. So looking at some of the key things tonight, obviously the number one thing that we're going to talk about is Cam Ross. An electric debut here at Scott Stadium for Cam Ross. And I mean, if you really go back and you look at kind of everything we'd heard from fall camp, Cam Ross was the offensive MVP, as running back coach Keith Gaither had called him, also the special teams coach, which, that came in handy tonight when he returned a 100-yard kickoff for the first time since 2019 when Joe Reed did it. Of course, obviously we got to throw a little shout out to the sponsor there with Joe Reed. But yeah, first guy to return a kickoff for a touchdown since 2019 was Cam Ross. Also tonight had 7 catches, 124 yards, and a touchdown. He really broke the game open for this UVA offense. You look at what Cam Ross did on that first touchdown scoring drive. So you had Chandler Morris roll out of the pocket, find him, and really Ross did a lot of the work on that play there to get them down to the 1-yard line. He joked afterwards, Jamari Taylor kind of took that touchdown from him. Taylor kind of came over to the sideline and admitted that too. He had 2 touchdowns tonight in his UVA debut, Jamari Taylor. But Cam Ross, really impressive debut for him. And talking to him after the game, he mentioned this, and this will be up in a story on the Sabre.com coming up in the next day or so, this offseason, the biggest thing that he had to work on to kind of get the reps, to get the, to become a starter, to kind of take off in his career, was he had to focus on catching the football. And so every single day in the offseason, he had 500 catches out there, and that's not just the jugs machine. He said he was out there with a couple other receivers, and they were throwing the ball to each other. So, yeah, the arms hurt after a little bit there. But Cam Ross, electric in his debut, had a couple really good plays, and coaches bring up the name a lot because he's kind of been the big success story here in the receiver room. But that's Malik Washington name came up again tonight. Tony Elliott said he's got a lot to do to match that Malik Washington name, but his kind of reminiscent of what Malik Washington was early on in his Cavalier career. So big debut for Cam Ross. Also got to shout out Trell Harris, one of the craziest catches that you see right over here. A big catch down there, and I think it's probably apt, the biggest catch, the best catch for Virginia since Dontavian Wicks back in 2021. During that season, the catch that he had against Miami. I mean, still can't believe that play. Can't believe this one either. They took a look on it on the replay, but Trell Harris, incredible one-handed grab, bringing that one in. That set up another touchdown for the Cavaliers. So big night for Trell Harris. And I thought the receiving core overall, they were kind of the group that had a little bit of question mark coming into this because no proven guy in that group, but it's a lot of really talented guys. Trell Harris, who came into the game a little banged up, had a hamstring injury that had kind of limited his practice reps over the past couple weeks. He did a really good job tonight. Again, 3 catches, 93 yards, most of them coming on that 48-yard one-handed catch that he had here. Jamal Edgerrin, he looked like he had a really good connection with Chandler Morris when he was in the game. 3 catches, 24 yards, and a touchdown. Doesn't sound like a whole lot, but he was the first pass that Chandler Morris connected on. So the receiving group, really good between Cam Ross, Trell Harris, and Jamal Edgerrin. I think that's a solid core going forward. Overall, let's talk about Chandler Morris. I mean, obviously, that's one of the big questions that people had after the game. How is Chandler Morris's health? We saw him, take off on that big 28-yard run, and he probably could have slid down there at the end, but he told Tony Elliott that, he saw the end zone. He wanted to try to make that push to get into the end zone at the end there, but obviously gets dinged up. And at first it looked like a helmet injury, but it actually, they say, is his shoulder. So it's his left non-throwing arm shoulder that's banged up. Tony Elliott said, he probably is looking good for next week, but, they'll see, kind of after today. He had a little bit of ice on it when he returned to the sidelines for a second. But yeah, Chandler Morris overall really impressive in his debut. Took a little bit to get going, but once he got going, really looked impressive out there. Again, he had 19 of 27, 264 yards passing, 2 touchdowns, and then 50 yards rushing on the ground, and overall looked really in command. Looked like a quarterback, the veteran quarterback that UVA had promised this offseason. The 2 touchdowns there through the air just looked really solid overall. It took a little bit of time to build up, and I mean, for good reason. I mean, they were shifting guys in and out on the offensive line, and that seems to be something that they're going to try this year, is to rotate a little bit on that offensive line. So you had the 5 starters: Mikhail Boley, Noah Josie, Brady Wilson, Drake Metcalf, and Wallace Unamba. Well, Unamba, he actually got banged up in that game, right knee injury. That's also looking like it's not going to be too big a deal either, and thank God, because of all the injuries they had at the right tackle position. A couple of us were joking in the press box afterwards that maybe they just need to rename the right tackle position something else because of all the bad luck they've had there with Monroe Mills, Michaelan Thomas. But Wallace Unamba looks okay, but you had Tyshawn Wyatt come in the game for him, Jack Whitmer come in the game for him. They mixed in Ethan Sipe there at right guard. They mixed in Kevin Wigginton at left guard and Ben York at left tackle on the other side. So they had 10 offensive linemen playing that first half. They even had a couple, lineups out there down there on the goal line where they had 7 offensive linemen all blocking there to set up one of those red zone touchdowns. And to mind you, they don't have Grady Brosterhouse, who was in a boot for this game, so they don't have the Grady Bunch push on the tush push on the goal line in those short yardage situations. So they bring in more offensive linemen, and that seems like something that they're going to try in the red zone. Had a lot more success in the red zone tonight as well. That's the offense. I thought it was a pretty good start after a slow start. It was a pretty good first game for them as far as how they got going. Defensively, I thought was really interesting. It was kind of a vintage John Radzinski defensive game plan: bend but don't break. But I thought there were some really impressive guys that they used tonight there. You had Landon Danley making his first career start at linebacker in place of Cam Robinson playing that position. A little bit of discrepancy before kickoff. Was it Maddox Marcellus? Was it Landon Danley? Trey McDonald was listed there on the depth chart, but it was Landon Danley pretty much for the entire game. Rarely left the field until they kind of switched to some of the reserves in the second half. So Danley really impressive on the night. Also defensively, Ethan Minter gets an interception. He looks like a really sure tackler in the open field. That's something that they're going to need, because that was something Jonas Sanker really brought to this Cavalier team all the time last season. So if Ethan Minter can kind of fill that spot next to Devin Neal, also impressive in this game. And then one guy that probably isn't going to get as much attention after the game, just because he didn't, not a lot of balls thrown out his way, and when he did, no catches made. Donovan Platt, the Army transfer, he wasn't listed as a starter, but for all intents and purposes, he played the majority of the game at that cornerback position when the first team defense was out there, and he looked really tremendous. He's a little bit shorter than the other corners because they're not all 6'4", 6'3" like Jordan Robinson, Emmanuel Carnley, but Donovan Platt looked really solid in this game. So exciting to see what this kind of secondary, this new look secondary, can kind of build off of. It's a lot of new guys. Jason Prevard, another guy that looked really good out there. And then we can't leave without talking about special teams, because that's something that's kind of was a big problem spot for Tony Elliott his first 2 years. Last year, they made some really big improvements in both the punt unit and also the kickoff unit. But the return game, that's where it was kind of a big issue. When we talked about Cam Ross, special teams had a big play there. First kickoff return for a touchdown since 2019. They also had their first punt block for a touchdown since 2019, with Caleb Hardy getting in on that, Trey McDonald recovering it. So some really solid special teams all around for Virginia, and that's something I know Keith Gaither, the special teams coach, has been really working for this offseason. So overall, I mean, probably one of the more complete efforts that you've seen out of a Tony Elliott team, especially in the opening week of the season, where usually they're trying to pick up the speed a little bit. And obviously this is going to lead us right into this NC State game, a non-conference game next week in Raleigh. We'll see how the Cavaliers kind of progress from here. How do they kind of take this from here? They said that a lot of stuff they want to improve on. Obviously, the injury and the health of the team, that's going to be a big topic going forward. Is Chandler Morris going to be A-okay to go next week? I tend to think, a left shoulder injury on your non-throwing arm. Tony Elliott said he looks pretty good, so that should progress pretty well for this Virginia team. Wallace Unamba, another one that said it's not too serious of an injury. And it was good to see Trell Harris, coming in this a little banged up with the hamstring injury. Some people said he was kind of limping into the stadium when they were there on the Wahoo Walk, but he looked good as well today. So health-wise, as long as things pick up, it's a good sign to see going into next week at NC State. But all right, that's going to do it for this post-game report here on the Who's On podcast for the Sabre.com. You can check out all of our post-game stories there. I will have another edition of the Who's On podcast coming out on Monday with our good friend Ahmad Hawkins, the Ball Hawk, lead color analyst for Virginia Athletics over the radio or for Virginia football. So you can stay tuned, watch that on Monday. We got a lot more coming up on the Sabre.com. So as always, go there and also subscribe. If you're here on YouTube, subscribe, follow on YouTube. Also catch the Who's On podcast, Apple, Spotify, wherever you find it. But game one's in the book. We got 11 more to go and hopefully some more after that. So we'll see you later here on the Who's On podcast.